All right, let's talk about something we all think we know like the back of our hand, school. But what if the whole system, the classrooms, the tests, the grades, wasn't just something that happened? What if it was all built from a very specific and, honestly, kind of surprising blueprint? That's what we're digging into today.
Okay, quick experiment. When I say the word education, what's the very first image that flashes into your mind? Don't overthink it, just what do you see?
I'm going to go out on a limb and guess it was something like this, right? A classroom, maybe a teacher up at the front, a stack of textbooks. And there's a really good reason that image is so universal. It's the very heart of a very particular model of learning.
And that model has a name. It's called the narrow meaning of education. It's not just a bunch of traditions. It's a formal, structured system designed to do one thing really well: deliver information inside an institution, like a school or a college, so you can get a piece of paper for a job. That diploma, that degree, that's the finish line.
And check this out. This is directly from our source material. It really gets to the core of it, defining this type of education as being stuck within institutional instruction. But that last part is the kicker. It points out that the students' own interests, their own passions, often get left behind. So this leads to a pretty wild idea that's at the center of this whole philosophy. The source material calls it the jug and mug theory. Picture this. The teacher is a full jug of knowledge, and the student, well, the student is just an empty mug waiting to be filled up. It paints learning as this simple one-way street. So, if this whole thing is a system, then what's the blueprint? What are the basic rules of the game?
Well, the blueprint has a few key rules you can't break. First, it is totally dominated by the teacher. That means students are basically passive. Remember the empty mug? It also all has to happen at a specific place, a school, and at a specific time, bell to bell. And success, it's measured by one thing, that degree or diploma. The whole point is to get you ready for your future life.
This system was actually designed with some really huge goals. Of course, it's about learning to think and getting you ready for a job. But it's way bigger than that. It's about social integration, making sure we all share the same cultural values. And maybe the biggest goal of all? Nation building. For centuries, this model was the engine that created the disciplined, literate workforce needed to run entire countries.
But a blueprint like this doesn't just pop out of nowhere. It was built piece by piece over a very long time for some very specific reasons. So let's do a quick history lesson to see how we got here.
Okay, speed round. Ancient civilizations, education was only for the elites. The medieval period, it was all about religion and memorizing texts. But the real game changer, the moment everything shifted, was the Industrial Revolution. All of a sudden, you needed a massive system to churn out workers. This is when school was basically designed for the factory, giving us age-based grades and standardized books. Sound familiar? Then colonialism came along and made everything even more rigid and exam-focused to produce clerks and administrators. Each era just bolted another piece onto the machine.
So, after all that, how does this blueprint actually stack up today? It's time for a report card. Let's look at the good and the not so good.
On the plus side, you can't argue with the structure. It's an organized, accountable way to pass down knowledge. And hey, that diploma is still a pretty clear ticket to getting a job. But the downsides are pretty major. It often puts way too much emphasis on just memorizing facts instead of thinking creatively. It's not great at handling emotional development, and it's pretty inflexible for anyone who learns differently. And all that focus on testing, it can create an insane amount of stress.
And our source material really hits the nail on the head with one of the biggest criticisms. It says the real-world applicability of what's learned may be minimal. This is the root of that question we have all asked at some point. When am I ever going to use this in real life? This system has always had a hard time answering that one. But look, this centuries-old blueprint isn't set in stone. It's actually starting to change, to evolve. So the big question is, what's next? We're starting to see some really interesting cracks in the old foundation. Technology obviously is a huge one, from smart boards to blended learning that mixes online and in-person class time. But the really massive shift could be competency-based education. This is a total game changer, because it says success isn't about how many hours you sat in a chair, it's about what you can actually do. It's about mastering skills, not just checking boxes. And that leaves us with this massive question. As our world changes faster than ever, is it enough to just keep tweaking this old blueprint? Or is it time to just throw out the plans and design something totally new for the future of learning? What do you think?